how I passed my NMC and the KNUST exam was, the NMC exam was one of the exams that have ever scared me in my life. I was literally scared. I was afraid. Not because I didn't learn. I learned. I prepared. But anything can happen. I was like, in passing every exam, there are two things that you must do. And then one of them is, I think when that time came, we joined some groups. We joined a group called, and then most of the questions that we practiced in that group actually came in that exam. I can give you two books that I learned, and then questions actually came from those books. And then one of them was, you asked us whether my school actually helped me to pass my NMC or the KNUST exam. I think yes. So ladies and gentlemen, welcome into another episode of Joy Idea Studios. I am here to share with you my NMC and the KNUST exam experience, what I went through, the bad and the worst and the good aspect of it. Like, it's a whole lot of interesting story, and if you are a final year student, you need to stay tuned with me. You need to watch this video to the end. There are a lot of things that you do not know what actually goes into this NMC and the KNUST exam. I am sharing this with you. That is going to help you, guide you to be able to also get the best out of yourself. Trying to share my story doesn't mean I know better, but then what I went through is what I'm going to share to you to also decide how is it going to be. Exam is about difference. What I wrote can be different from what you be writing. So my experience can be different from what you are going to experience. So, but it's good to learn. Hear what I'm going to say. Maybe that might also reflect in your upcoming exams. Before we continue, kindly click on the subscribe button. Remember to turn on the post notification so that you can get my other videos to watch. Share this video to every final year student to get to watch so that you can guide the person through how to also understand some of these things that comes into the NMC and the KNUST exams. My name is Emmanuel. Basically, how I passed my NMC exam and my KNUST exam is a story of reflection. When I was still in school, I used to study 4 courses a day. That was my timetable. I can take about medicine, surgery, PET, and ops. And then what I do is that in the evening, I will study 2 courses. So if I'm studying 1 major, I will study 1 minor. So if I'm studying medicine, I'll make sure I am adding ops, major, and then minor, so that the stress doesn't overtake me. So I'll make sure in the evening I study, may say from 8 to 10. So I'm taking medicine, and then from 10 to 12 I am taking obstetrics, and then in the morning I will take 1, that is surgery. And then if I go to school and I get the opportunity, maybe a lecturer didn't come or we have a free period, I will take the last course and study, making it 4. That was how I was trying my studies. So if I take medicine and then I am studying hypertension, so I make sure that after studying hypertension as a topic, I try to go and get past questions from hypertension. I will solve questions only from hypertension, and then I will go online to search MCQs from hypertension. So MCQs on hypertension, I will search for that. They will give me the questions, and then I will solve, just to test my understanding as whether what I learned theoretically is actually reflecting to my understanding of what I've studied. So that was basically what I was doing. So after studying every course, I go to check the past questions and I get the MCQs, and then I solve to make sure that I have basic understanding from that aspect. Most times I go to YouTube. Then go to learn. There is this woman there, registered nurse. She's a lecturer on YouTube, a registered nurse, and then her lectures is very interesting. It's very good. So most times I will go, if I'm studying a particular topic and the understanding seems to be difficult, I'll just go online, search for that topic that I want to study, go to the lady's page, choose that topic, comes to sit down, then the lady will explain. When it comes to the aspect of whether I've ever been afraid of the NMC exam or the KNUST exam, sincerely speaking, I was very scared. I was afraid. Not because I was not learning, not because I was not prepared, but I was like, what if I fail? How am I going to explain myself? Like a whole lot of things was coming to my mind. I was prepared, all right. I was ready for the exam, but what if I fail? What if something goes wrong? So that really got me scared, and I was like, God help me. So passing an exam, there are actually two things involved. Number one, God, and then the other one is hard work. Most people do talk about the fact that exam is not about prayers. Exam is actually about prayers. You don't devote your time to prayers without learning. You learn, then you pray. Because if you pray without learning, actually you're going to fail. God is not going to come down from heaven and take the pen and going to write for you. Miracles doesn't happen that way. God said he helps those who help themselves. So basically, if you pray, you have to learn. That is why someone can be very intelligent, very, very intelligent. The person goes to sit in the exam hall, still fail the exam due to tension. The person can be confused and still can't pass the exam. And someone is there, the person is not damned, but at least grace have located the person and the person is able to pass the exam. So imagine sometimes you can be reading a question that you've not come across before. You've not seen that type of question before. But grace can just locate you, then you go and choose the right answer. You don't know that is the right answer, but you are just choosing. That is grace. So sometimes grace can help you to pass an exam. That is why you must pray, then you learn. Because if you pray without learning, I don't think you can pass an exam, because God is not going to come from heaven, go and write that paper for you. And if you learn without praying, you can still pass. But then, what if grace doesn't locate you? That is where the problem comes. So someone is there, the person knows the book, the person understands everything, but then the person still fails the exam. What is wrong? What have gone wrong? Grace did not locate that person. That was how some of these groups actually helped us to pass our NMC and the KNUST exam. Not because they gave us the questions that was coming, but they solved past questions with us. So basically, we learned something from it, and then when we entered, some questions were past questions, and then if you see a question like that, you smile, then you choose the answer, and then you are good to go. So basically, that was how some of these groups were contributing to the success that we've gotten so far. Yes, I actually saw questions. I solved questions, and when I entered to the exam center, the same questions appeared on my screen. And then it was like a daydream or something like that, because I was not believing myself to the extent that you solve questions, you enter, and that questions actually appeared on your screen. And then the only thing you need to do is to just read, point the answer, and you are good to go. When it comes to questions like that, we don't even spend up to 1 minute, because you have already solved the question. So you just tap on it, and then you are good to go. This was because all these questions, most of it was past questions. Yeah, I can confidently say that, because most of these things were past questions. And then we solved past questions. I think myself and my group, we did a very good job. If we go to class or if we go for group meetings, we try to solve at least some number of past questions before we get into the studies itself. So if we have a topic to discuss, we first of all solve past questions. Everybody will get his or a share of the past questions. Then we now get into the topics and study theoretically. That was how we're doing. We're doing that because so that if the past question is not there, you can be able to apply what you've learned according to the topic. So that was basically how we did the whole thing. I can remember we were solving this book, One Touch. We were solving One Touch. We were solving Erasmus, and then we were solving questions online. So you go online, search for NMC questions, you solve them, and if you enter, it's there. So it was kind of something like we were not. Most of us were even surprised, because when we got to realize that most of the questions were past questions, that was where we diverted our attention to the past questions aspect. We were now studying the past questions, entering to write. But most of us, me in particular, I was very careful. I was very careful to the extent that, what if the past question is not there in the next paper? Have I learned something different? So I will solve some of the past questions and learn the topic, so that if the past question is not there, I can be able to apply the topics that I have learned to answer the questions. So that was how I was balancing my studies. I was trying to do something so that it don't be like you've only focused on one aspect, and if that aspect was not there, you don't have any place to go again. So basically, that was how I manage my process. Yes, as whether the school really helped us in passing this exam or not, yes, I can say the school helped us. And how did the school help us? The school helped us in passing this exam through the lectures and the preparation, because in my school, getting to the final preparation, the school organized a preparation program for us, and then we go to classes. They prepare us on the major and the minor courses. So medicine, surgery was, that kind of major on the timetable, and the other ones were also flying around the table. So that was the preparation that the school did for us. And then aside that, most of the lectures that we had, most questions came from the lectures. Yes, that's what we can say, because what our tutors do explain to us, what they talk about, actually reflected in the exam. And most times applications, the clinical practice, all these things appeared in the exam. Sometimes they will come to ask you, we brought a client to the ward and this happened, so as a nurse, what are you going to do? Questions. So some questions you do not need to stress yourself, you just need to use maturity, apply, then you are good to go. So basically that was my experience, and I think it was a good one. It was lovely. If someone tells me that NMC or KNUST is difficult, I'll tell the person that it is never difficult. But then, why do people still feel? That is a question we can answer. Because everyone and his or her side of learning. Someone is the person that actually learning. Someone can sit with the book for the whole 24 hours, but then the person cannot pick anything. Someone can sit with the book just for 1 hour, 30 minutes, the person is okay. The person picks a lot of information that is going to help the person. So some of these things vary. Someone will take something easy, someone will take it difficult. So that was the experience we had. So sometimes if someone failed an exam, others will tag them as they are lazy, they don't like to learn. Trust me, there are people that sit with the book for 24 hours, but still it doesn't work out. It doesn't work out because not because they are not learning. Their level of understanding is different. And how God created us with our IQ differences, the time someone will take to understand something will be different from the time that someone will also take to understand something. Someone can take 10 minutes to understand a particular topic. The other person needs to spend days to understand that same particular topic. So it's about individual difference. And if you're a kind of person who identifies yourself as someone who takes it harder to understand something, it means you have to devote more time. You have to devote more time to learning. You have to be able to revise that kind of topic all the time. At least always try to get some information out of the topics. So basically that's how we go about it.